One thing I've realized about Nintendo as a die-hard fan is that they intentionally make limited quantities of all their products, which has been their business practice for many years, mainly to ensure that they don't overproduce copies and lose money. What they would also do a lot of back in the day was create extremely limited quantities of specialized titles, meaning that in general, Nintendo games are just harder to come by. This fact got me interested in creating today's video about the rarest games on every Nintendo console. Oh yeah, and before I get started, my name is Copycat, and if you haven't yet, then please subscribe to my channel, hit that bell button, and I do now have a join button where if you sign up to become a member, you can support me in making videos for years to come. The very first home console that Nintendo would release was the NES that came out in North America in 1985. Out of the 700 games on the system over its history, there are 3 specific standouts when it comes to rarity, 2 of which are specialty cartridges, and 1 that had a name change shortly after its release, making the original's existence very sparse. The first on the specialty side is the Nintendo World Championship cartridge that came in 2 forms. Gray, that's less rare, as over 300 were handed out to finalists of the championship tournament, and Gold, where there were only 26 in existence that were given out in separate contests run by Nintendo Power. Both versions contain the same 3 games in some sort of custom minigame form, including Super Mario Bros., Rad Racer, and Tetris, also containing an exposed dip switch so a set amount of time could be added for the players to complete each game. After doing a bit of research, I found out that the Gold version recently sold for just over $15,000 US, and I even read that one sold on eBay for over $100,000 in 2014. Which is kinda crazy, but also makes sense as it's every video game collector's dream to own one. The other specialty title that's actually even rarer, as there's only one known in existence, is the Nintendo Campus Challenge that was used in 1991 to hold competitions across 50 North American universities and colleges. Containing custom minigames of Super Mario Bros. 3, Pinbot, and Dr. Mario, the cartridges used in those challenges were never meant to go out to the general public, but somehow one ended up in a garage sale in New York. This game sold for an astronomical price of $20,000 US in 2009, meaning it's worth even more to this day, wherever it is. The last game for the system I want to talk about, one that was actually purchasable in a store, is called Stadium Events, developed by Bandai that used a strange third-party peripheral called the Family Fun Fitness Pad to play different track and field events. The story of why this is so rare comes from Nintendo buying the rights to that pad peripheral, recalling the scant 200 copies that were in circulation, then re-releasing their own power pad, and renaming the game to what they wanted, World Class Track Meet. Reportedly, Nintendo also destroyed thousands of the original copies, so if you didn't return the game at the time, or were able to find it in a landfill somewhere, it can fetch up to $1,200 loose, or $13,000 brand new. Nintendo's next system was also their first handheld venture in the Game Boy, that was released in Japan and North America in 1989. There are no specialty games for this system, but there are a few that were produced in extremely low numbers, so years later they became much more valuable. 2 titles that fit this exact mold are Spud's Adventure and Amazing Tater, that are both part of Atlas Studios' Puzzle Boy series that focus on controlling a sentient potato. At the time, Atlas was wary of releasing games in the Western market, only putting a few copies on store shelves as they weren't sure how their titles were gonna do. That fact, combined with some die-hard fans of everything that the studio does, drove the price of these games to anywhere from $100 to $200 USD loose. The company's next home console is the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, that was released in North America in 1991 with a library of 718 titles and 4 championship cartridges. One of these specialized cartridges, which is also the rarest game on the system, is the Nintendo PowerFest 94, that was used in promotional pop-up tournaments that would appear outside of major department stores across North America, including Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels, Super Mario Kart, and Ken Griffey Jr. Presents Major League Baseball. Players had 6 minutes in each game to rack up as high as a score as possible. Unlike the past Nintendo championships, Finalists never received any game for their winnings, meaning that the cartridges are meant really for gameplay only, which is evident as out of the 33 that did exist, only 2 were never destroyed. It's really hard to say exactly how much one of the 2 cartridges would go for on the open market, but the last sale of one went for over $12,000 US. Although there may be technically rare, more obscure games on the specific system, I have to talk about one that steadily increases in price every year and has turned into one of the most sought after games for collectors, Earthbound. What's interesting about this particular title is that it absolutely failed upon its North American release, only selling around 140,000 copies, as fans weren't quite sure what to make of the crude humor, cartoonish graphics, and out-of-place RPG elements for that time. It wouldn't be until years later where it would gain a massive cult following, and nowadays, a sealed brand new version of this game will fetch over $4,000. Nintendo next console, which is also their biggest failure of all time, is the Virtual Boy, which contained a stereoscopic 3D head-mounted display that was released in 1995. This idea was definitely ahead of its time, as it attempted to be a virtual reality device, but unfortunately, the monochrome display left people with headaches, the 3D effect was unimpressive, and it was marketed as being portable, but that just wasn't the case. With under 1 million units sold, the Virtual Boy was canned pretty quickly by Nintendo, which left the system with a paltry 22 titles in total. One Japanese release that didn't make it to the North American market is a game called Virtual Bowling, which is actually one of the final titles made for the console, developed by Athena Studios. There's nothing insanely great about this bowling simulator, it's just that it was produced in insanely small amounts, as the developer must have known that the Virtual Boy would be ceasing production, so they didn't want to lose any money and put out too many copies. If you do want to own this game for yourself, then you'll have to shell out between $1,000 and $2,000 US, albeit if you can even find someone selling one. In terms of strictly North American releases, an Atlus game once again takes the top spot with their Megami Tensei spin-off called Jack Bros. This top-down dungeon-crawling puzzle-solving title is often referred to as one of the best entries on the console, but ran into the same critiques every other game on the system had, in that the 3D effect was unneeded. A copy of the NA version of this game nowadays will fetch anywhere from $500 to $1,000. The next home console in the company's history was the N64, which was released in 1996, containing a few strange, rare titles. Probably the weirdest is one called Clay Fighter Sculptor's Cut, which was an updated version of a previous game that oddly could only be rented from Blockbuster and not purchased at all. This is 100% where the game's rarity lies, as not many copies of this fighting title exist in the general public, and if they do, that probably means someone didn't return the game back to Blockbuster. If you do happen to have a copy of this game, one apparently sold for $14,500 in 2020. In terms of games that you could actually buy on store shelves, apparently one that can go for over $1,000 is the Zelda Ocarina of Time Collector's Edition, that actually didn't add any new content or give you any goodies, but you did receive a gold-colored cartridge. This specific version of the game was only out for a limited time, meaning that there are very small quantities of it, especially sealed ones. The next system we're going to look at in Nintendo's follow-up to the Game Boy is the Gameboy Color, which was released worldwide in 1998. Containing slightly better processing power than its predecessor, and sporting games now in color, this system was highly successful, selling millions of units and containing 900 titles in total. In terms of rare games on the handheld console, there is one specialty title worth around $4,000 in The Legend of Zelda, Oracle of Seasons, and Oracle of Ages Limited Edition. This collector's item contains skins for the Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance, a t-shirt, a poster, and copies of both games. However, it is almost impossible to find a brand new version of this limited edition kit, as most fans probably opened the package as they wanted to play these amazing titles. One Game Boy Color title that was overlooked during the time of its release, but gained in popularity years later, is Shantae, that was released in 2002, which at the time was right at the end of the system's lifespan. Apparently only 25,000 copies of this side-scrolling action-adventure were ever produced by Capcom, and they refused to make a second print due to the Game Boy Advance's release. If you have this game or are lucky enough to find it somewhere, it can fetch you around $3,000 US. The next console Nintendo would release was another handheld one called the Game Boy Advance that was released worldwide in 2001. The rarest game on the system is from a series I've actually never heard of called Pocky and Rocky, this time with Becky, developed by Taito and Ultron, released in North America in 2002. What makes this shoot-'em-up, action-adventure game so rare is that it was intentionally released in very limited quantities for a limited amount of time, making the sealed version of this game almost impossible to find. The only known sale of one was in March of 2020, where it went for an outstanding $5,000 on eBay. One of the hardest Game Boy Advance titles to come across, sealed or not, is the Hudson Soft and Konami release called Ninja 5-0, which is a Shinobi-inspired platformer regarded as one of the most interesting games on the system. Although its sales figures were fine in Japan, its Western release really failed to sell, where years later it would gain an intense cult following to this day, which is probably why a loose version of this game can sell for well over $200. Nintendo would release another system in 2001, this time in the home console variety with the GameCube, that would release several specialized titles that are worth a lot of money to this day. The one title that reached the top of the worthiness charts isn't technically a game, but is instead a way to store and sort your Pokemon on the GameCube in the Pokemon box. This strange add-on wasn't available anywhere in stores, as in North America, it can only be purchased through the Nintendo World online shop, which already made it rarer from the get-go. Also, admittedly, many fans weren't flocking to buy this add-on, as it seems rather useless unless for some reason you have over 1,000 Pokemon caught. As of today, this title can reportedly sell for around $1,000. In terms of actual games that you could play and buy on store shelves, the Metroid Prime and Zelda The Wind Waker 2-in-1 combo is insanely rare, albeit it was only available if you buy the GameCube alongside it, meaning that people who already owned one wouldn't be shelling out the big bucks for this title. Released only once during the 2005 Christmas season, this bundle of these two games is almost impossible to find, especially in brand new form, but if you do have one, it can reach prices of $1,500. Nintendo would return to the handheld market with their highly successful DS console, which stands for Dual Screen or Developer System depending on who you ask, which was released in 2004. Now, the rarest game on the DS isn't technically a playable title, as it's actually a trailer of The Legend of Zelda: Twilight Princess, that would be released on the GameCube and Wii 2 years later. This strange cartridge was handed out to 500 people at the 2004 Electronic Entertainment Expo event, and was actually available before the DS was even released, and to this day can barely be found. However, if you do somehow want a copy of this trailer for the DS, then you'll have to pay upwards of $500. Now, oddly enough, the actual rarest game on the system is one called Shepherd's Crossing 2, which is a sequel to the PS2 game developed by Success Corp about villagers living in a small town having to raise livestock, harvest crops, and of course build a farm. It's hard to say exactly why this game costs around $350 for a loose version, but it apparently has somewhat of a niche fan base that will shell out the dough for it. Nintendo's next home console is also their most successful of all time, the Wii, which doesn't have any specialty titles, and its rarest game is a completely unexpected one called American Mensa Academy. Mind games like this were very popular during this time period, and what makes this puzzle-solving title so rare was its extremely small print run, on top of it not really selling at all during its initial release window. Those two factors combined has seen this game sell for over $350 in some cases. Wow. In terms of sealed rarity, almost every Nintendo collector wants to get their hands on the Metroid Prime Trilogy collection that included the GameCube's Metroid Prime, Metroid Prime 2 Echoes, and Metroid Prime 3 Corruption, all on one Wii disc. Nintendo at the time apparently severely underestimated the demand for this compilation, where it's been a want for major collectors for years, willing to pay over $300 for a brand new version. One of Nintendo's most interesting systems is the 3DS, that added a revolutionary screen that allowed you to view the game in 3D without any glasses. This console has a very random Rarest game called Barbie, Groom and Glam Pops that supposedly sold for $634 brand new on eBay. Why this particular title is so sought after is due to the sales doing so poorly at first that it was pulled from store shelves and destroyed by the publisher. The only other 3DS game I want to mention in this video, as it is steadily rising in rarity and price, is the Fire Emblem Fates Special Edition, which includes all 3 versions of the game: Birthright, Conquest, and Revelation. This is really the only reason why it's so valuable, and an unsealed version would definitely go for the big bucks. Nintendo's next home console was the Wii U, that unfortunately sold very poorly, mainly due to its weird name and lack of release titles at launch. One of the rarest games on the system is the copy that comes with a Hyrule Warriors limited edition that was only sold in New York City's Nintendo World Store. It was intentionally made in sparse quantities. Containing the game, system, and a few goodies, a sealed version of this item is worth around $1,600 on the open market. Now, the rarest game that isn't in specialty form is a pretty unexpected one in Hello Kitty Cruisers that can get you up to $200 brand new. Collectors value this game highly, as the company who made it were worried about its performance, intentionally printing very few copies. There's nothing special about the game, as it's just a Mario Kart clone with Hello Kitty characters, and I'm curious to see in a few years if its rarity maintains. Nintendo's next console, and the one they're still producing games on, is the Switch, that so far has over 3,000 titles, making it one of the most expansive systems in the company's history. As of May 2021, the rarest game for the Switch is the Bayonetta Non-Stop Climax Edition, that includes both games, a steelbook, 22 cards, and stickers. Not only was this copy distributed in limited numbers, it was also only released in Japan, meaning that the price of importing one can reach up to $500. The rarest non-collector's item game on the Switch is one called Fox and Forest, which was a Kickstarter project developed by Bonus Level Entertainment. Only 1,000 Switch physical copies were distributed worldwide, meaning that if you want the cartridge, it will cost you $300 in comparison to the $9.99 digital version. Alright, that's gonna be it for today's video, guys. I really hope you did enjoy this one. If you did, please leave a like, comment below what you thought about it, and of course, subscribe to my channel. Also, I do have an Instagram at Copycat Gamer, where I upload some cool clips and items from my collection that you won't see anywhere else. Hope you guys all have a good day, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye!